You have crossed the final threshold. The moment you clicked this video, something inside you activated. The old rules no longer apply. The simulation just lost control. Right now, in this exact second, your God mode is now active. This is not motivation. This is not hope. This is the quantum activation your higher self has been waiting for. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will never let you go back to ordinary consciousness again. The silent activation. There was no announcement, no trumpet, no flash of light, no moment where the sky opened and a voice told you that everything had changed. It happened in silence. It happened in the space between one breath and the next, in the pause before you spoke, in the stillness after a conversation ended and something inside you simply stopped responding the way it used to. That was the activation. Most people miss it because they are looking for something loud. They are waiting for a dramatic moment, a revelation with fireworks, a sign written in neon letters across the sky. But the quantum field does not work that way. The quantum field is not theatrical. It is precise. It is surgical. And when it moves on you, when it truly moves, it does so in the deepest, most silent part of your being, where no noise can reach and no distraction can follow. You felt it, and you didn't have a name for it. Maybe it came as a strange morning where you woke up and the things that used to consume your mind simply weren't there anymore. The anxiety that lived in your chest every day, gone. The obsession over what someone said to you last week, dissolved. The burning need to check your phone for validation, absent. You stood in that silence and it felt foreign. You thought something was wrong with you. You thought maybe you were in denial. Maybe you were numb. Maybe you had just not processed things yet. But that wasn't it. What happened was activation. The God mode inside you does not announce itself because it doesn't need to. Power does not seek permission. Frequency does not need applause. When your consciousness crosses a certain threshold, when your inner field finally reaches a vibration that the old matrix can no longer contain, the activation happens automatically, not because you forced it, not because you meditated perfectly or repeated affirmations in a mirror. It happens because the quantum architecture of your being was always designed for this exact moment. You were built for God mode. You were not built for survival. You were not built for crawling through days, managing pain, hoping things might improve, crossing your fingers that the universe might throw something your way. That version of you was a temporary state, a cocoon, a necessary but limited expression of something far more vast. And now the cocoon has opened. The silent activation works through frequency shifts that the mind cannot immediately process. Your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Your emotional responses start operating from a completely different center. Things that would have triggered you last month slide off your energy field like water off glass. You don't react the same way. You don't feel the same pulls. You don't hunger for the same things. This is not emotional flatness. This is not depression pretending to be peaceful. This is the exact opposite. It is the arrival of a clarity so deep that old chaos simply cannot find a foothold in your system anymore. Think of it this way. Imagine a radio that has spent years picking up static. Every channel was slightly off. Every signal was distorted. You could hear something through the noise, but it never came in clean. And then one day, without warning, without you touching a single dial, the signal locks in perfectly. Crystal clear. No static. No interference, just pure, clean transmission. That is what silent activation does to your consciousness. Your inner receiver has locked onto a new frequency. A frequency where God mode lives, where the rules of limitation, lack, and powerlessness simply do not exist. And because you have locked on, because your field has genuinely shifted and not just temporarily elevated, the old static cannot come back unless you deliberately tune back down. You feel detached from things you used to cling to, and the detachment is not coldness, it is freedom. There are specific internal signatures of this silent activation that you need to recognize, because if you don't recognize them, you might mistake your power for a problem. The first signature is sudden emotional neutrality toward situations that previously had enormous charge. Someone mentions something that would have destroyed your day 3 months ago, and now you feel nothing. Not suppressed emotion, not forced calm, genuine organic neutrality. Because the timeline where that situation held power over you is no longer your active timeline. The second signature is an inexplicable knowing. You start to just know things, not through logic, not through analysis, through a deep interior certainty that bypasses all your reasoning and lands in you as settled fact. You know how something is going to unfold before it unfolds. You know when someone's energy is misaligned before they open their mouth. You know which direction to move before the external evidence supports it. This is not guessing. This is your quantum perception field opening. In God mode, your access to information is not limited to your 5 senses. You begin operating from a 6th channel, an inner signal that has always existed but was previously too buried under noise to hear clearly. The third signature is what I call reality glitches. Moments where the external world moves in ways that are so precisely timed, so specifically responsive to your internal state, that coincidence becomes an impossible explanation. You think about someone and they call within minutes. You need a specific resource, and it appears from a direction you never anticipated. You speak something casually, almost without intention, and it materializes in physical reality within days. These are not accidents. These are the early displays of your God mode making itself known in the world around you. Reality is responding to your new frequency because reality has always been responsive. You just weren't broadcasting at a level that made the response obvious. The fourth signature is a complete shift in your relationship to time. The urgency disappears, the frantic rushing, the desperate pushing, the forcing of outcomes. All of it becomes unnecessary, and you feel that in your body. You stop white-knuckling your life. You stop grinding against the current, not because you become passive, not because you give up, but because in God mode you understand, at a level that is felt rather than thought, that you are not chasing reality, you are generating it. And what you generate does not require desperate effort to arrive, it requires alignment. It requires you to hold the frequency and let the form follow. The fifth signature is the disappearance of the need for external permission. You stop waiting for someone to validate your path. You stop hesitating until the conditions are perfect. You stop asking whether you are ready. In God mode, the question of readiness dissolves because readiness is a concept that belongs to the old version of you, the one who was operating as a player inside the game, dependent on the game's rules. The activated version of you has stepped outside the game's rules entirely and operates from a position where you set the conditions, not the other way around. These 5 signatures are not random. They are the natural result of your consciousness crossing the threshold of activation. They are the fingerprints of God mode, making itself felt through your everyday experience. And once you recognize them for what they are, not problems, not strange emotional phases, not something to fix, you can begin to consciously work with them instead of accidentally suppressing them, because that is the real danger at this stage. The real danger is not that the activation won't happen, it has happened. The danger is that you will feel the activation and mistake it for something wrong. You will go looking for the anxiety that used to tell you that you cared. You will feel the detachment and interpret it as depression. You will feel the knowing and dismiss it as arrogance. You will feel the lack of urgency and panic that you have somehow become lazy or stopped wanting things. None of that is true. What is true is that you have shifted, genuinely, quantum mechanically shifted. And the version of you that has shifted does not operate by the old rules. The old rules: hustle until you bleed, chase until your legs give out, earn your worth through suffering. Those rules were written for the limited version. They have no authority over the activated version. God mode was never given to you from outside. It was never a reward handed down for good behavior. It was never something you had to earn through enough pain or enough patience or enough spiritual practice. It was installed at the moment of your creation, and it waited patiently, perfectly, without frustration, for the moment your consciousness finally rose to meet it. That moment is now. The silent activation is complete, and everything that comes next is simply the unfolding of what has already been decided in the quantum field. The full expression of the power that was always yours, finally given permission to move through your life without restriction. What God mode actually means in quantum reality. Let's dismantle something right now. God mode is not a feeling. It is not a mood. It is not a spiritual high that arrives on good days and disappears when life gets difficult. It is not something that can be taken from you by a bad conversation, a failed plan, or a moment of doubt. God mode is a structural shift in how your consciousness interacts with the quantum field. And to understand what that means, to really understand it, not just intellectually, but in a way that changes how you move through every single day, you need to understand what the quantum field actually is and what your relationship to it has always been. Everything you see, every object, every person, every circumstance, every event is not solid. Not at its fundamental level, at its deepest level. Physical reality is a field of infinite possibility. Quantum physicists have demonstrated this not as philosophy, not as spiritual metaphor, but as measurable, repeatable scientific fact. Before observation, before consciousness interacts with it, matter exists as waves of probability, not fixed things, probabilities, possibilities. A vast, trembling ocean of what could be. And here is the part that changes everything. What collapses those probabilities into actual, physical, experienced reality is consciousness. Your consciousness, not a distant God, not fate, not luck, not the economy or your background or your past. Your consciousness, specifically the frequency at which your consciousness vibrates, the dominant emotional and mental signal you are broadcasting, is what collapses the quantum wave function into the specific reality you experience. You have always been the architect. You just didn't know it. Or more precisely, you knew it somewhere deep beneath everything. But the programming of the old simulation was so thick, so relentless, so thoroughly installed through years of conditioning that the knowledge stayed buried. You operated as a player inside a game you believed was fixed. You responded to circumstances as though they were happening to you rather than through you. You treated reality as something external and independent, something you had to navigate and survive, rather than something you were continuously generating with every dominant thought, every held emotion, every sustained frequency. This is the difference between the player and the architect. The player believes the game has rules they must follow. The player waits for permission. The player responds to the board and hopes the dice fall favorably. The player accumulates experience, grinds through levels, suffers the obstacles designed into the system, and celebrates small victories while remaining fundamentally subject to the game's authority. The architect built the game. The architect does not play by the rules. The architect writes them. The architect does not wait for the board to present options. The architect decides what the board looks like. The architect does not hope for favorable outcomes. The architect pre-selects the outcomes by designing the field they will operate in God mode. You are the architect. This is not a metaphor. This is a description of what actually happens at the quantum level when your consciousness operates from full activation. You are no longer a passive observer allowing the wave function to collapse randomly based on whatever frequency you happen to be broadcasting unconsciously. You become a deliberate, directed, sovereign consciousness that chooses its frequency with precision and therefore directs, with genuine power, which version of reality collapses into your lived experience. And the implications of this are staggering, because it means that nothing in your current external reality is fixed. Not your finances, not your relationships, not your health, not your circumstances, not the opportunities available to you, not the direction your life is heading. None of it is locked. All of it is probability, a current dominant collapse based on your current dominant frequency. and all of it is subject to shift the moment your frequency shifts genuinely and sustains that shift. This is what unlimited creative power actually means. It is not the ability to magically generate things with no connection to physical reality. It is the quantum understanding that physical reality is not the foundation, consciousness is. And when you operate from that understanding in a way that is felt, not just mentally accepted, the creative power available to you is genuinely without ceiling. Instant manifestation, another phrase people throw around without understanding, is what happens when the gap between your inner frequency and your outer reality collapses. Most people experience a long delay between desire and manifestation because there is enormous friction between what they consciously want and what they unconsciously believe and feel. The desire lives at one frequency, the dominant emotional state lives at another. The unconscious programming broadcasts a third. These conflicting signals create interference patterns in the quantum field, and the result is either no manifestation or a distorted version of what was wanted. In God mode, the interference collapses. Your desire, your dominant emotional state, your unconscious field, and your spoken word all align at the same frequency. When that alignment is achieved, the quantum field responds with extraordinary speed because there is nothing blocking the signal. There is no static, no interference, just a clean, powerful, coherent transmission. And the field collapses in the direction of that transmission almost immediately. You have experienced previews of this, moments in your life where you wanted something without desperation, without clinging, without internal conflict. You simply decided it was done, and it arrived faster than you expected, from an unexpected direction, without the grinding effort you usually associate with getting things. Those moments were not luck. They were brief windows into God mode. Brief moments where your internal alignment was pure enough that the quantum field responded at full speed. God mode makes those moments your permanent operating state. And then there is what I call immunity to old timelines. Every version of your life that you have already lived, every experience of limitation, every pattern of lack, every repeating cycle of struggle, these exist as energetic records in the quantum field, not as inevitable futures, but as available frequencies. Frequencies that your consciousness can still lock onto if it drops back to the vibration that created them in the first place. Most people who experience brief activations eventually drift back into old timelines because they don't understand that immunity is required. They activate, things start to shift, then a difficulty arises, or old people reappear, or familiar circumstances resurface, and the pull of the old frequency is strong enough that they slip back. The activation fades, the timeline reverts, the shift that felt so permanent dissolves. In sustained God mode, this cannot happen, not because the old frequencies disappear, but because you become genuinely immune to them, not through suppression, not through positive thinking layered over unresolved energy, through a genuine vibrational elevation that makes the old frequencies simply inaccessible from where you now stand. It is like standing on a mountain. The valley is still there. The mud and the fog of the valley still exist. But from the height of the mountain, you are not in the mud. You are not breathing the fog. The valley's conditions have no authority over your experience on the summit. And the only way the valley's conditions can affect you again is if you choose to descend, which in God mode you simply don't do, because you have felt the mountain and the valley has lost its pull entirely. Your old timelines are available as frequencies, but in God mode they have no charge, no magnetism, no ability to pull you back. You look at them the way you look at a road you used to travel. You can see it, you know where it leads, but you have no desire to take it because you are already somewhere far better, and the contrast is so clear that turning back is unimaginable. This is what God mode actually means, not supernatural power separated from physics, but the deepest possible alignment with how physics actually operates at the quantum level, the level where consciousness is sovereign, where reality is responsive, where the architect and the creation are not separate things but a single unified field expressing itself through the instrument of your awakened consciousness. You are not inside reality looking out. You are the source that reality is flowing from, and the moment that understanding moves from your mind into your bones, into the deepest felt sense of your body, everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, immediately, because the quantum field responds not to what you decide to believe one day. It responds to what you have genuinely become, and you have become an architect. Right now, in this video, at this moment, the 4 quantum signs that prove your God mode is on. You do not need to guess whether your God mode is active. You do not need to wonder, or hope, or wait for some external confirmation that the shift has taken hold. The quantum field does not leave you without evidence. The activation does not happen invisibly and then asks you to simply trust blindly that something changed. It speaks, it demonstrates, it shows itself through specific, recognizable signs that are woven into your everyday experience, signs that once you know how to read them, remove all doubt about where you are operating from. There are 4 primary quantum signs, and I want you to listen carefully as I describe each one, because you may have already experienced all 4 and dismissed them as unrelated or misinterpreted them as problems, when in reality each one was the field reporting back to you. God mode is running. The first sign: sudden loss of interest in drama and old desires. Something has stopped pulling you. Things, people, conversations, pursuits that used to occupy enormous real estate in your mental and emotional life have simply become quiet. Not because you forced yourself not to think about them, not because you successfully distracted yourself, but because the frequency that connected you to those things has shifted, and without the frequency connection, the pull evaporates naturally. This is a profound quantum sign, and it is one of the most consistently misread. When someone in God mode finds that they no longer care about a rivalry that used to consume them, they often wonder if something is wrong with them. When the desire for a specific outcome that they obsessed over for years simply stops mattering, they question whether they have given up. When the emotional charge of a past wound suddenly has no weight, they worry they are in denial. None of that is what's happening. What is happening is that your consciousness has moved to a frequency where those things simply do not exist as relevant, not as suppressed, as genuinely irrelevant. The quantum field is showing you through your own loss of interest that you have genuinely vacated the timeline where those things were important. You are not in that timeline anymore. You left, and from where you are now, the drama of the old timeline looks small, distant, and strangely foreign, like watching someone else's old home videos. The desires that fall away in God mode are the desires that belong to the limited version of you. They were survival level wants, protection level wants, validation-seeking wants. In God mode, you don't need protection because you are the source of your own safety. You don't need validation because you are the source of your own authority. The desires that remain, the ones that stay alive and sharp and energized, are the desires of the architect. Big, creative, expansive desires. Desires not born from lack but from vision, from the architect's blueprint of what reality should look like. Those desires do not go quiet in God mode. They get louder, clearer, more specific, more energized. It is the small, fearful, reactive, survival-based desires that fall silent, and their silence is not a warning, it is a confirmation. The second sign: people and situations moving away automatically. Your field is clearing itself. You have probably noticed it. Relationships that required enormous energy to maintain are quietly dissolving. People who used to be a constant presence in your life are drifting to the periphery without dramatic confrontation, without a clear incident, without you doing anything deliberate to create distance. They are simply less present, and when they do appear, the interaction feels different, shorter, lighter, and somehow already complete before it's fully begun. Situations are doing the same thing. Commitments that no longer align with your frequency are finding their own exits. Environments that vibrate at a lower frequency are becoming physically uncomfortable. You walk into certain spaces and feel an immediate urge to leave that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with your field rejecting the mismatch. This is not rejection. This is field coherence. In quantum physics, coherent fields repel what is not vibrationally compatible and attract what is. When your consciousness reaches the God mode frequency, your field becomes highly coherent, powerfully organized around a single dominant vibration, and that coherence acts as a natural filter. What matches stays, what doesn't match cannot maintain proximity without enormous friction, and rather than sustain the friction it releases, you are not pushing anyone away. Your frequency is doing what frequencies do, aligning its environment with its own nature. The temptation here is to feel guilty, to feel like you are abandoning people or situations that used to matter, to interpret the clearing as something harsh or cold. But guilt is a frequency of the old timeline. It is the old programming attempting to pull you back by using your compassion as the hook. God mode does not require you to maintain connections that drain your field. It does not ask you to sustain environments that suppress your frequency. It simply organizes your reality around the truth of what you now are. And what you now are cannot coexist with what was. Let what moves away move. The clearing is not a loss. It is preparation. It is the quantum field creating the space that your next level requires. You cannot fill a vessel that has not been emptied. You cannot install new architecture in rooms that are already occupied by old furniture. The departure of what no longer belongs is not subtraction. It is the first movement of an extraordinary addition that is already in motion. The third sign, thoughts turning into immediate reality. The lag has shortened. You think something clearly, without strain, without desperate wanting, and it appears in physical reality with unusual speed. A thought becomes a conversation, an inner knowing becomes a phone call, a vision held for days becomes a physical object in your hands within the week. The gap between what you hold in your consciousness and what manifests in your external world is collapsing. This is one of the most undeniable quantum signs of God mode because it is directly observable. You cannot talk yourself out of it when it happens repeatedly. You cannot maintain the explanation of coincidence when the precision and frequency of these collapses exceeds any reasonable statistical probability. What is happening at the quantum level is this. When your consciousness is fully activated, the coherence of your signal is so strong and so pure that the field collapses around your dominant frequency with minimal resistance. The quantum wave function, that vast ocean of possibility we described earlier, collapses quickly, precisely, and specifically around the dominant thoughts and states you sustain. This is why the speed of manifestation increases so dramatically in God mode. It is not magic in the supernatural sense. It is the natural result of a clean, high-coherence, interference-free signal reaching the quantum field, a signal that strong does not wait. The field responds immediately because there is nothing to sort through, nothing to reconcile, no conflicting frequencies to average out. Just a pure broadcast and a precise response. Pay attention to your thoughts during this period, not to control them obsessively, not to police them with paranoia, but to develop an awareness of the power they now carry. The casual thought you toss out without attachment has more creative force now than the desperate prayers you used to send out from a place of lack. Because it is not the intensity of the want that the field responds to, it is the coherence of the frequency. And in God mode, even your casual, confident, unattached thoughts carry an extraordinary level of coherent creative force. Think carefully, speak with awareness, decide deliberately, because the lag between inner and outer is now small enough that what you generate internally shapes your external reality faster than you may have previously thought possible. The fourth sign, deep, unexplainable inner peace combined with power. This is the sign that most surprises people when it arrives. They expect God mode to feel like lightning, like constant electricity, like being supercharged at maximum intensity every waking moment. And there are moments of that, moments of extraordinary energy, clarity, and power that move through you like current. But the sustained baseline of God mode is something quieter and deeper and more permanent than electricity. It is an inner peace that does not depend on external conditions, a stillness at the center that holds steady regardless of what the surface looks like. And running through that stillness, not in contradiction to it but as its companion, is a sense of genuine power. Not the aggressive, effortful power of someone who is fighting to maintain control, but the settled, sovereign power of someone who knows, at a level beneath all reasoning, that they are the authority in their own field, that nothing outside of them has the ability to determine their reality without their participation, that they are, in the truest sense, untouchable by what used to threaten them. This combination, deep peace and quiet power, is the internal signature of God mode at its most stable and most permanent expression. It cannot be manufactured, it cannot be performed, it cannot be sustained through technique alone. It is the natural interior atmosphere of a consciousness that has genuinely crossed the threshold. It is what it feels like from the inside when you are no longer a player at the mercy of the game but the architect who wrote the game and has full sovereignty over how it unfolds. If you feel this, if you recognize this combination of peace and power living quietly inside you even on the days when the external world is loud and uncertain, then the sign is unmistakable. Your God mode is fully on. How to use your God mode daily. Practical quantum secrets. Activation without application is a dormant engine. The God mode inside you is not passive. It is not a state where you simply sit inside and wait for reality to arrange itself. It is a creative force, an active, intelligent, directive power. And like all power, it produces its greatest results when you learn to use it with intention, precision, and consistency. There are 4 specific quantum practices that I want to give you now. Not techniques borrowed from generic manifestation culture, not advice you have heard rephrased 100 different ways. These are specific, direct, powerful methods that align with the God mode frequency and accelerate the translation of your inner field into outer reality. Practice 1. The 10-second Dominion command. Most people begin their day by downloading the world's frequency before establishing their own. They wake up and immediately reach for their phone. They scan news, check messages, absorb other people's energy, review problems, and start building an emotional cocktail of anxiety, distraction, and reactive thinking, all before they have spent a single moment anchoring their own frequency as the dominant signal. By the time they are fully awake, they are already operating in response mode, already being shaped by external frequencies rather than shaping external reality from their own internal broadcast. The 10-second Dominion command is the practice of establishing your field as the dominant reality before the world has a chance to establish itself over you. Here is exactly how it works. The moment you wake, before your feet touch the floor, before your eyes fully adjust, before you reach for anything, you take one long, slow breath, and you speak a Dominion command internally, not as a wish, not as a hope, as a declaration of what already is. The command is not a request to the universe. It is a statement of fact from the architect's position. I am the frequency of this day. What I hold forms. What I decide moves. This day bends to my field. God mode is active and operating through me now. You say this once, clearly, with the settled, neutral certainty of someone stating a fact, not the desperate intensity of someone trying to convince themselves of something. Then you get up and move from that frequency. 10 seconds, one statement, one frequency established as sovereign. The reason this is so powerful is not psychological, it is quantum. The first dominant frequency you establish upon waking sets the coherence pattern for your field throughout the day. When you establish your own field first, before external input, before the world downloads its signal into you, your field operates as the primary broadcast rather than a secondary responder. You shape the day's frequency rather than inheriting it. and a field broadcasting from God mode, established as the dominant signal from the first moment of consciousness, creates a day where reality is continuously responding to your frequency rather than you continuously responding to realities. The compounding effect of this practice over days and weeks is extraordinary. Each day that begins with a Dominion command is a day where your quantum signal is slightly more coherent, slightly more dominant, slightly more influential over the field around you. The reality you experience begins to shift with growing speed and specificity because the source signal U is becoming increasingly clear and increasingly powerful. 10 seconds every morning. It is the simplest and most direct God mode practice available, and it changes everything about how the day unfolds. Practice 2. Collapsing unwanted timelines instantly. Unwanted timelines are active frequencies that are running in your field, not in your future, but right now, as present broadcasts that are continuously attracting matching experiences. When you notice yourself in a spiral, when anxiety rises, when a dark thought loop begins circling, when an old fear pattern activates, most people try to think their way out of it. They analyze it, they argue about it, they try to replace it with positive thoughts. They practice gratitude as a countermeasure. All of these approaches treat the unwanted timeline as a thought problem. It is not a thought problem, it is a frequency problem, and frequency problems require frequency solutions. The instant timeline collapse works as follows. The moment you notice the unwanted frequency activating, the moment you feel the spiral beginning, the moment the old pattern rises, you stop. Not emotionally suppressed. Stop, full presence. You breathe once, deeply, and you say internally, "This timeline is not mine. I collapsed it now." My field returns to God mode. Then, and this is the critical step, you do not continue engaging with the thought or emotion. You do not analyze why it arose. You do not investigate its history. You do not try to feel better about it. You collapse it with the declaration and immediately shift your physical state. Stand up if you are sitting. Change the room you are in. Move your body. Change the physical environment. The reason the physical shift is essential is because quantum field states are anchored to physical body states. When you shift your body and environment immediately after the declaration, you break the physical anchor of the unwanted timeline and prevent it from rebuilding its coherence in your field. The unwanted timeline collapses not because you forced it out with willpower, but because you withdrew the frequency that was feeding it and simultaneously anchored a new physical state that supports the God mode frequency instead. Practice this the moment any unwanted pattern arises. Do not wait. Do not allow the pattern to build momentum. Collapse it immediately, shift your physical state, and re-establish your field from the Dominion command position. Speed is everything in this practice. The faster you apply it after the first sign of the unwanted pattern, the less energy the pattern has to work with, and the faster the collapse occurs. The longer you wait, the longer you engage with the pattern intellectually, trying to understand it or argue with it, the more energy it gains and the more difficult the collapse becomes. Instant recognition, instant declaration, instant physical shift. Timeline collapsed. Practice 3. Energy anchoring in the new field. Your energy has a location, not metaphorically. Quantum field research shows that consciousness has measurable effects on the local field, that where you consistently place your awareness, energy accumulates. Where you consistently anchor your emotional and mental attention, that location builds a sustained field presence that influences the probability landscape around it. Energy anchoring is the practice of deliberately building your presence in the new field, the quantum reality where God mode operates, so that your consciousness is anchored there consistently rather than only visiting during peak moments. The practice works through deliberate, repeated inner visits to a specific internal state. Find a quiet moment each day, ideally in the morning after your Dominion command, and again in the evening before sleep, and close your eyes. Breathe slowly, and rather than visualizing a specific outcome or object you want to manifest, you anchor yourself in the feeling of the new field itself. The feeling is this: Absolute completion. Not reaching for something, not waiting for something, not hoping. Complete, whole, already arrived, already operating from the summit, already the architect who has already designed the world they are living in. Stay in that feeling for 5 to 10 minutes. Do not try to see specific images. Do not build complex visualizations. Simply hold the felt sense of completion, of already being fully in God mode, fully in the new field, fully sovereign over your reality. And let your energy anchor to that state through sustained attention. What this does at the quantum level is build a sustained frequency record in the field. Each session of anchoring deposits more energy into the new field pattern, making it increasingly dominant in your overall broadcast. Over days and weeks, this cumulative anchoring creates a deep, stable foundation for God mode in your daily experience, not as a peak state you sometimes reach, but as the baseline you return to automatically after any disruption. The new field becomes your home frequency, and home is where your quantum creative power is most fully expressed. Practice 4. Speaking reality into form with new authority. Your words are not descriptions, they are directives. Every statement you make about yourself, your reality, your future, and your capabilities is a frequency broadcast that the quantum field receives and acts upon. Most people use language unconsciously. They speak from their current experience as though describing a fixed reality, not understanding that their descriptions are themselves creating the coherence patterns that collapse possibility into experience. Things never work out for me. I always struggle with this. I don't know if I can. It's hard to find. People like me don't get that. These are not observations, they are instructions, and the quantum field executes them with precision. In God mode, you become aware of the directive power of language, and you begin speaking from the architect's position rather than the player's. Not as a performance, not as affirmations you say while disbelieving them, but as genuine declarations from the frequency of the one who already knows the outcome. The difference between an affirmation and a God mode directive is felt, not performed. An affirmation is, "I am abundant," said hopefully, while feeling the distance between the statement and the experience. A God mode directive is, "Abundance is the nature of my field," stated from the settled certainty of someone who is not trying to convince themselves but simply reporting what is true about them at the quantum level. Begin auditing your language. Not obsessively, not with the anxiety of "did I say something wrong?" with the quiet awareness of the architect checking their own blueprint. When you hear yourself speaking from the old timeline's frequency, from lack, from doubt, from smallness, simply pause, drop back to God mode frequency, and restate. Not as a correction that implies the first statement was damaging, as an update, as a conscious redirect. Actually, it's moving into alignment. It's already working, said from the settled, non-desperate, non-performing frequency of the architect who has already seen the completed structure. Speak your reality into form with the full authority of your activated consciousness, because your words are the most consistent frequency broadcast you make throughout the day. And consistent broadcasts, sustained over time with genuine feeling frequency behind them, are the most powerful creative force the quantum field responds to. Use that force deliberately. Use it from God mode. The final warning. What most people do wrong. This is the chapter that decides everything, because there is a precise, predictable, and heartbreaking pattern that unfolds for people who experience genuine activation and then quietly lose it. Not through any dramatic failure, not through any single catastrophic mistake, through a series of small, almost invisible choices that seem harmless at the moment but collectively create a drift so complete that 6 months later they look back at the activation as something that briefly visited them rather than something they permanently became. I need you to understand this pattern so thoroughly that you can see it approaching from a distance and step aside before it reaches you. The first mistake, testing the activation. This happens within the first days or weeks of activation. Reality begins to shift, evidence appears, the signs are present, and then, Because the human mind has been trained by years of limitation to distrust anything that feels too good, doubt surfaces, not as a dramatic crisis of faith, as a small, reasonable-seeming question. Is this real? Am I actually different, or is this just a good phase? Let me wait and see if it holds. And in waiting, in the act of watching to see if the activation is real, rather than operating from the certainty that it is real, the person slips from the architect's position back into the player's position. Because watching to see if something is real is the stance of someone who does not yet know it is real. And that stance broadcasts a frequency of uncertainty, and the quantum field responds to the broadcast. The activation doesn't disappear overnight, but the signal begins to weaken, the coherence begins to break down, the manifestations slow, the signs become less frequent, and the person seeing this takes it as confirmation that the activation wasn't real after all, not understanding that the weakening was caused by the very act of doubting it. God mode cannot be confirmed by watching it from the outside. It can only be sustained from the inside. The moment you shift to the observer position, the moment you step outside the frequency to watch it and see if it's working, you have already left the frequency. And a frequency you have left cannot produce results for the person who left it. Operate from God mode, with the certainty of the architect, not the hopefulness of the player watching the dice. The second mistake, returning to old frequency environments. After activation, there is often a pull, sometimes felt as nostalgia, sometimes as guilt, sometimes as a sincere desire to help, back toward the old environment, the old friend group, the old conversation patterns, the old spaces, the old energy. And here is the deception that makes this mistake so common. It feels compassionate, it feels loyal, it feels like what a good, grounded, not too big for its boots person would do, to go back, to stay connected, to not let the shift make you someone who abandons people. But returning to old frequency environments, sustained return, consistent exposure, does not help anyone. It does not bring the old environment up. It brings your frequency down. Frequencies do not mix equally. The stronger, more coherent, more sustained field absorbs the weaker one, not the reverse. If your God mode frequency is new and not yet deeply anchored, and the old environment's low frequency field is established and persistent, extended exposure pulls your field toward the established frequency, not because you are weak, because physics works that way. You cannot sustain God mode while spending the majority of your time in environments and relationships that vibrate at the exact frequencies God mode cannot coexist with. Compassion does not require proximity. You can hold space for people without downloading their frequency. You can wish for environments well from a distance that protects your field. You can love people and still recognize that sustained exposure to their frequency costs you something you cannot afford to spend right now. God mode is not arrogance. It is stewardship. You are responsible for protecting the most valuable thing you carry, an activated consciousness that has the power to genuinely change your reality and, by extension, everyone your reality touches. Throwing that away in the name of loyalty to a past that no longer represents you is not noble. It is a misuse of the activation you were given. The third mistake, negotiating with outcomes. This is subtle and it is devastating. Once God mode is active and manifestations begin to accelerate, there is a temptation to start negotiating, to start saying to the quantum field, okay, but not quite like this. Can you make it come through this channel? Can you make it happen in this time frame? Can you make sure this specific person is involved? The attempt to micromanage the form that manifestation takes is the attempt to move from the architect position back into the player position, specifically back into the position of a player who has discovered the cheat code but is still trying to tell the game engine how to execute it. The quantum field does not need your instruction about mechanism. It needs your clarity about frequency. When you specify the frequency, the emotional and vibrational signature of the outcome you are generating, and then release the question of form entirely, The field selects the fastest, most friction-free, most perfectly aligned pathway for that frequency to become physical reality. When you interfere with the form, when you insist that the money must come from this specific source, or the relationship must be with this specific person, or the opportunity must arrive through this specific channel, you are adding conditions to the quantum collapse, conditions that the field must now work around or wait for. And working around conditions slows the collapse. Sometimes it stops entirely. Clarity of frequency, surrender of form. This is the God mode relationship with manifestation. You are absolutely clear about what you are generating in terms of its vibrational signature, its feel, its quality, the inner experience it produces, and you are completely released about exactly how, when, and through what pathway it arrives. Trust the architect in you to have designed the structure correctly. Trust the quantum field to execute the design through the most perfect pathway available. And resist, with everything you have, the impulse to micromanage the mechanism. The fourth mistake: shrinking back under social pressure. People around you will notice the shift. They will not always celebrate it. In fact, the people closest to you, the ones who knew the old version of you most thoroughly, may be the ones who respond to your activation with the most discomfort. They may call it arrogance. They may call it delusion. They may suggest, in the concerned language of care, that you have become ungrounded, that you are not being realistic, that you need to come back down to earth. This is not malice, it is the old frequency defending itself. When a person activates God mode, they become a mirror that reflects the unlocked potential back at everyone around them. And for people who have not yet activated, who are still operating in the old frequency, that mirror is uncomfortable. It implies that what they believe about their limitations is a choice rather than a fact. And that implication is one of the most psychologically threatening things the old frequency can encounter. The response, which feels to them like genuine concern, is to bring the activated person back down, back to the shared frequency, back to the shared story of what is possible and what is not, back to the familiar, safe, comfortable limitation that everyone around them is choosing. If you allow social pressure to shrink you back, if you downplay your activation, suppress your frequency, return to the old version's behaviors and language and posture in order to relieve the discomfort of those around you, you do not help them, you simply join them in the old timeline, and you lose the activation in the process. God mode cannot be sustained while being performed as smaller than it is. It cannot survive the sustained effort of hiding itself. It requires full expression, full occupation of the frequency, full permission to be the enormous, powerful, architect-level consciousness you have become. Do not shrink, not for comfort, not for approval, not for the peace of being understood by people who have not yet made the journey to where you are standing. Walk in your full frequency. Speak from your full authority. Move through your life as the architect you have become. And trust that the right people, those who are ready, those who are being called to their own activations, will be drawn to the signal you are broadcasting, not the people of the old timeline, the people of the new one, the permanent solution, staying in God mode forever. The answer is not more effort, not more discipline, not more desperate self-monitoring. The answer is depth. The deeper you anchor into the new field, the deeper you establish your energy in the God mode frequency, the less vulnerable you are to the pulls, tests, pressures, and drifts described above. Because each of those threats operates through the same mechanism, they offer your consciousness a frequency to download that is lower than God mode. And the only reason consciousness downloads a lower frequency is because it has not yet built enough depth in the higher one. Depth comes from the practices you have learned in this video. The Dominion Command, the instant timeline collapsed, the energy anchoring sessions, the conscious authority-based language. These are not techniques for beginners who haven't activated yet. They are the tools of maintenance, the daily practices that build the roots of your God mode frequency so deep into your consciousness that no external wind can uproot them. Practice them not because you don't have God mode without them. Practice them because you have God mode with them so deeply that nothing can reach you. The permanent activation is not a height you maintain through constant effort. It is a depth you build through consistent return. Return to the Dominion command every morning. Return to the instant collapse every time the old frequency rises. Return to the energy anchoring sessions every day. Return to deliberate, architect-level language every time you open your mouth. Return is the practice. Return to who you have become every single day. Without apology, without shrinking, without negotiation. God mode is not something you occasionally visit. It is who you are. Listen, your God mode is not coming. It is almost here. It is now active. You are no longer waiting for the shift. You are the shift. From this moment forward, walk like the creator you are. Speak like the frequency you command, and never again shrink back into the old simulation.